I might have a problem.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's your boy Will, and Happy New Year to one and all. I am recording this on New Year's Eve, and I've been meaning to do a video like this for a long time. As you can see, I have a pretty large board game collection. I like board games. I like different variety of board games, everything from card games to your traditional strategy type games to your social deduction games. And I just wanted to kind of rank my favorites out of the collection that I own. So this is going to be my top 10 favorite board games that I own. I have very simple criteria for this list in terms of my ranking. So number one, is it fun? Is it a fun game? Is it something I like to revisit from time to time? Which leads into number two, replayability. A board game isn't fun if you only play it once and then it's always kind of the same. I like games that give a little bit of a variety every single time that you play. Three, the uniqueness of the game. Is the actual gameplay very unique? Is it something... Not Monopoly, basically, because everybody grew up on Monopoly, but there are so many other games that are a lot more better than Monopoly as well. And four, is it challenging? I like a game to challenge me. I don't necessarily go for the super simple games. I like games with a little bit of strategy, but don't get me wrong, I do like a simple concept every now and then. Before I get to the list, like most lists are, this is a personal list, so my choices or my collection might vary from what you currently play. And if you have a different sense of opinions or what is your favorite board game, let me know that in the comments down below. Also, without saying it too much, every game that I'm going to show you, I actually do enjoy, and I highly recommend checking out, even if you've never heard of it or never played with it. Some of them are a little bit more traditional, other ones are kind of weird. So hopefully you'll stick with me. And if this is your first video with me, hi, my name's Will. I do a bunch of geeky stuff on the internet, and this is just a place where I show that with the rest of the world. So if that's your bag, if movies or comics or games or drinking is your bag, why not subscribe to the channel? I'd love to get to know you. Still creeping up towards 400 subscribers, even though we're in the new year. I don't think I've crossed it at this point, but it would greatly appreciate it if you would. So, without further ado, let's jump into the list, shall we? Honorable mention, Categories. Categories is a word-based game where you roll a 26-sided dice, and based off of the letter that you get a corresponding list of different items, rather items in a fridge, or places to go on vacation, or US cities. It's your job to come up with a particular answer to each question, but only using words that start with the letter that was rolled. Then you'll go around the table comparing it with your opponents. If you get the same answer, neither person gets a point. I think it's a fun game. It does remind me a lot of my childhood. This was one of the first games that I had growing up that was different from your basic Monopoly or Scrabble and things like that. It's a lot of fun to play with a large group of people. I think the minimum is like 2 to 4 players, but you can go above that if you really want to. It is unique every single time based off of the letters that you get. One of the kind of downsides to the game, not really a downside, if you play with a bunch of other nerds, you end up having a plethora of different pop culture references you can use for your answer, and then no one really copies each other at that point, and everyone gets max points. So challenge level does vary based off of who you're playing with, but overall it has a lot of sentimental value for me. It's a lot of fun, and you can get really creative with the words that you use. Honorable mention, Dungeon Mayhem. Dungeon Mayhem is a 4-player Dungeons & Dragons themed card game created by Wizards of the Coast. It is a 4-player card game where you each take over one of 4 characters and you're given an individual deck. You start off with 10 hit points, and using the cards in your deck, you will reduce each player's hit points down to 0. Last person remaining wins. It's a very quick card game, and it's really a nice introduction to the concept of Dungeons & Dragons to people who might have never actually played Dungeons & Dragons. Each of the 4 characters are based off of a actual class in Dungeons & Dragons, and a lot of the cards invoke a lot of the themes and spells from the game. It's really quick, it's really simple to learn. You can get a couple games out of it really easily, and it's just a lot of fun, and it's one of those games that are quick, simple, especially when you're getting people into a lot of different board games. I like it. I think the artwork on it is actually a lot of fun, and again, you can't beat a simple card game either. Honorable mention, Cards Against Humanity. Cards Against Humanity is pretty self-explanatory at this point. Most people have played it, but if you haven't, you start off with a hand size of about 7 cards, and each turn someone reads off a card, and then you have to give that person a card from your hand that is meant to complete or answer the question on the card. Most of them are crude and funny, and sometimes really disgusting. I mean, for God's sakes, this is how I learned what smegma was. Just, if you need to know, Google it at this point. Overall, it is a fun game. It's a fun party game. There's no real size limit of people playing the game, which is nice. And it's most people's go-to party game because it's kind of edgy and stuff like that. But also, a quick honorable mention to Cyanide and Happiness as well, which is very similar to Cards Against Humanity. They have Joking Hazard and Trial by Trolley. Both are really fun games. Very similar to Cards Against Humanity. However, they use a lot of animated images on their cards, a lot of crude humor as well, some even cruder than Cards Against Humanity. So any of them would be fun for an over 18 party or whatever that you're doing. I probably wouldn't really let an 8-year-old play the game, but overall they're really fun card games and very simple to learn for people getting into the board game genre, basically. Honorable mention, Pandemic. Now, before I get into it, I know. The game is a cooperative strategy-based game for up to 4 players where you are trying to stop a global pandemic. Yeah, why play the game when you can live it? Okay, so the reason this is on my honorable mentions is twofold. Number one, the version that I got is the anniversary edition of the game. It comes in a fantastic metal medic tin, very similar to what was used in World War I and World War II. The board itself, the gameplay mat is massive, much larger than what you get in the regular edition. The figures are a lot more detailed. All the other little figurines and things that go along with the game are spectacular. And also, it's a very challenging game. There's one way to win, 3 ways to lose. It is a challenging game, which I like challenging games. But again, the elephant in the room, I purchased the game back in November of 2019. I didn't know what was going to happen 6 months later. So in terms of replayability, it's kind of a downer to play right now. Again, why play it when you're living? Number 10, Wavelength. Wavelength is a party game that is designed to test the mental connectivity between each team member. You start each round by picking up 2 different ranges. There's a dial that you spin a few times and reveal your range. Within that range, you want your team to score the highest points displayed in the range. By doing so, you will give them a single word clue. Then you want to try to hope that your team will turn the dial to reference the actual range within the two ranges that you're going for. It's a really cool game. I like it a lot. Number one, it's such a unique design game. I love the interaction of the apparatus that comes with it. And it's also really cool because the opposing team can also participate each round as well. They're not just sitting on the sidelines listening to what's happening. They have the opportunity to steal points as well if they can guess better than the actual team going. So it's a really fun game. It's a really interactive game. And also, being a party game, it does require a good amount of people involved in order to play it successfully. It's not really a 2-player game, unfortunately. I like it a lot because it has a very unique design and a unique sort of gameplay mechanic with the dial and how it turns. And I just think it's a lot of fun. Number 9, Ticket to Ride. Ticket to Ride is a strategy-based game produced by Days of Wonder, and it involves train. There have been multiple different versions of Ticket to Ride set in different countries, but the version that I'm showing today is the version based in the United States. You take the role of one of 5 different colored trains, and your job is to try to complete certain tasks based off of cards that you draw. Each card that you have will have a certain goal and a certain point value. The smaller the point value, the easier the goal, and so on and so forth. So it is a game that invokes a lot of strategy because you have to plan out if you're going to be able to achieve these goals based off the cards that you draw. You're limited to what you can do each turn, and you're also competing against the other players at the table. And there's limited space, so you're going to be vying for some pretty sweet train pass, and it's an easy game to dick over your friends with. I will tell you that from experience. I like how the mechanic works. I like that it's simple but has a lot of strategy involved in it. Do you go for maximum point values, which are longer train routes that you have to connect, or do you go for smaller point values and try to rack up as many as you can throughout the game? You are limited to the number of train cars that you have, so you have to plan out accordingly. If you have a strong start, you might have a weak finish, or if you try to take too many big points, you won't be able to complete them and you'll get no points for it. It does take a lot of skill involved in it. It's a little bit more deceptively challenging than I think is led to believe once you initially take a look at the game. It's a really good looking board. I like the interaction with the pieces. I like the thought process that goes into some of the challenges. It is a lot of fun, and it definitely is something that has a good level of replayability, but it's not necessarily as challenging to pick up for any newer players to the games as well. But I think it's a fun game. It's definitely a good place to start if you're looking for something a little different than the big ones, like Monopoly and Scrabble and so on and so forth. Number 8 on the list, Disney's Villainous. You know, when you're younger, you always think the good guys are the right ones, but as you get older, you realize the villains have a lot more fun, and that's where Disney's Villainous comes in. This is a game where you take the role of one of Disney's iconic villains. Depending on if you have the expansion pack, you'll have access to more villains as well. Each villain comes with their own deck, their own board, their own very well designed individual figures and different goals that they have to achieve. And you playing against your other villains, whoever gets to their goal first wins. And it's really unique. Each villain has their own strengths and weaknesses. Some villains are a little bit easier to achieve their goals than others. I'm looking at you, Prince John. And some are a lot more challenging than they need to be. I'm looking at you, Ursula. But overall, it's a really fun game. It has a lot of strategy into it. I like how each deck is defined by each character. The design of the cards is wonderful. I love the artwork that they've come up with the game. The figures are great to look at as well. I like the challenge involved in it. It's easy to be a villain and to dick over your other villains when you're playing the game. And I like, even if you have the expansions, you can mix and match them with the core game. So you can really play with a lot of different villains from Disney's Rogues Gallery. It's a lot of fun to play with. It is challenging if you're not necessarily familiar, or if you pick a villain based off of just your favorites, you may struggle with that villain's overall mechanic or their goal. So pick wisely. It does have a good level of replay value because you can try different villains each time you play, but there is a finite number of villains, so that may or may not allow for a lot of replayability. Also, you're limited to the number of people that can play in a single setting. I believe the max is 6. Number 7 on my list, Muffin Time. So Muffin Time is a newer game that I purchased. It is another card-based game, very similar to something like Cards of Humanity. You're given a number of cards at the start of the game. The goal of the game is to start your turn with 10 cards in hand. Now, each card is going to give you a different power and different ability, and that you can use to inflict to your opponents. But each card is also very unique and pretty weird and crazy too. There are some cards that force you to draw multiple cards, or to force your opponent to give you a card as well. There are some cards that are based off of reactions, like if you're wearing a hat and you're the only person wearing the hat at the table, you draw 2 cards. Or if someone picks up a card face down from your side of the table without saying anything, they lose 2 cards. It's a really unique gameplay feature. It's a lot of fun to play. Admittedly though, it is wildly unpredictable. The game itself can go from being a few minutes long to being an hour long, depending on who you're playing with, or how many people are countering cards and things like that. It's unpredictable. It's a lot of fun. It just depends. Just be prepared that they can go really quick or really long. I think the card designs are great. I love the mechanic of the game itself. I think some of the cards are just wildly crazy. And I think if you get a good group of people together who are expecting this sort of unpredictability, I think you're going to really enjoy it as well. Number 6 on my list, Deception, Murder in Hong Kong. Deception, Murder in Hong Kong is made by Gray Fox Games. It is a social deduction game, one of 2 that is on my list right now. It is a beautiful looking game, and it is a murder mystery, which is something that I enjoy interacting with. You have one person who is a forensics expert, and they're the only person who knows who the murderer is. The murderer, who is randomly picked by the people at the table, will identify a clue and a murder weapon to the forensics expert, and then it's the expert's job to try to give clues based off of different tiles in front of them to the rest of the players at the table. Then it's the player's job to try to determine which one of them is the murderer. All the time while the murderer is literally at the table trying to sow seeds of doubt and confusion with other players. It is like the quintessential social deduction game. I think it's a lot of fun. It has a lot of different cards, and the clues that you're allowed to give are very vague and can apply to multiple different cards depending on the people at the table. It's their interpretation of what's in front of them. And it's really cool to interact with people in this sort of environment. And the other thing is, the forensic expert is the only person that knows who the murderer is, but they're not allowed to say anything. The only communication they can do is with tiles at the table. It's only 3 rounds that you have in order to guess the murderer. I haven't actually played my physical copy yet, but I played it at a friend's house, and it was so much fun. I enjoyed playing it so much, and I had to own it myself. So I'm looking forward to cracking open my edition as well. And there are other game modes too. Some of them when you introduce an accomplice or a witness, and it makes the game so much more in depth, and it's so much fun. I highly recommend Deception Murder in Hong Kong. Number 5 is the networks. In the networks, you take over the role of a TV executive, and you have the job of trying to achieve as much viewership as possible over the course of 5 different seasons. Within each round or season, you are assembling stars and television shows to your time slot. You're also taking ad deals to try to build as much money as possible. It's a very unique game, and the one reason why this game ranks so much highly on my list is that it's very flexible in terms of how many people can play. You can have a maximum of 5 people playing the game, but you can also go all the way down to just 1 person. Yes, it is a game that you can play by yourself if you don't have a lot of friends to show up. Anyway, I love the artwork of the cards. It's very reminiscent of like the 1930s, 1940s sort of Art Deco design. It has a very Mad Men feel to it when you're trying to assemble the best lineup for your television show and catering to the stars that you sign and getting the revenue from the advertisements that you pick up. I love just the absurdity of some of the stars and the shows, how much of a play on words it is. It's a lot of fun, and it's a game that can wildly shift in terms of who's winning and who's losing at any given point in time. It's very unpredictable, it's a lot of fun, and it's a game that you can actually challenge yourself to run solo, or you can run it with your friends, and it's a great time. I love the design of the game. The mechanic of the game is a lot of fun too. It's just a blast to play. Number 4 on my list is Zero. Zero is a game most people may or may not have heard of. The best way I can describe it is Family Feud, but in reverse. Instead of wanting to get the most popular answer, you definitely want to get the least possible answer. Everybody starts in the middle of the board, and each turn someone reads off one of the different sort of trivia cards or poll cards that were polled by a certain amount of the populace at the time. You want to give an answer based off of the lowest possible answer given, but you still want to give an answer that was given. Based off of the answers that are given by the people at the table, everyone has a certain point value, anywhere from 10 to all the way up to 100. Those numbers will indicate how much further you move on the board. Last person on the board wins. But you do get a couple lifelines in the game. You get a me too, a skip it, and a rewind it. These tools are designed to help keep you on the board as long as possible, or to skip questions that you may not know the answer to. This is probably the second oldest game that I have, and I've played it all the time. Every time I have a game night, it's usually one of the simplest games that we crack open, and you can get a few games in pretty easily, especially if you got people who aren't necessarily super into the more complicated games. The design's very simple. It's just a trivia game, but it's a trivia game that's a lot of fun. The one downside I will say to this game is that this did come out it came out in 2011, and there's never been any sort of additional cards or updated cards for the game. I think it's a great concept, and it has great replayability, but if you've had it as long as I have, you've probably gone through just about every card in the set. So yeah, it's kind of hard at that point. But it's a lot of fun. If you're lucky enough to find it, I don't know if it's really available out there, but if it is and you can get your hands on it, it's a great trivia game. Definitely want to add to your collection. Number 3, Betrayal at House on the Hill. If you're big into board games, I'm pretty sure you've heard of Betrayal at House on the Hill, but this is a very unique sort of horror survival game. You start off as one of 6 characters investigating a spooky mansion. At each turn, you're exploring this mansion, uncovering new room tiles, uncovering items and events in each room, and also the dreaded omens that could affect the gameplay in wildly different ways. The unique thing about this game is that everyone starts off on the same team, but eventually, once enough omens are not achieved, the haunt begins. And the haunt is where the game really kicks up into high gear. You have a player's guide that tells you which scenario is triggered based off of which haunt. Each of the core games has 50 scenarios in it, so you're usually guaranteed every single time you play this game to have a different sort of game that it switches into after the haunt begins, where one player becomes the enemy or nobody becomes the enemy, and there's a different supernatural element that you have to overcome in order to win the game. I love how the gameplay switches from a team game to a one versus all game in the drop of a hat. You could get an omen on your first turn and not succeed in it, and the haunt immediately begins. It is a game that shifts and changes wildly, and I love it. I know there are expansions and legacy versions of this game currently out, but the core game is a good place to start if you're interested in the sort of unique and unpredictable gameplay that Betrayal gives you. I love the way the figures are designed. I know that there have been some upgrades to figures and game cards and things like that. And it's a great game. It's a fun game. It can definitely be challenging, especially if you're a newbie to this sort of type of complex gaming. But if you give it a shot and you roll with the punches, you're gonna have an awesome time. And every single time you play it, it's gonna be different. And I love that about it. It's definitely one of my favorite board games. I love to play it every single time I get the opportunity to. And it's so unique and so much fun. Number 2, Cheese Thief. This is probably the cutest game I have, and it is a social deduction game, and it's so much fun. Everyone takes the role of a sleeping mouse who are waiting to wake up together in the morning to share cheese. Unfortunately, one of the little mice is an evil bastard and wants to steal that cheese for themselves. Each night, everyone goes to sleep, and one by one, based off of the number that you roll, everyone will wake up one at a time to investigate, see if the cheese is still there, check another player's number, acknowledge other mice that wake up, but one of you is a little thief. And whatever one that wakes up is the thief, they must steal the cheese. And then once everyone wakes up, that's when the deduction begins. You start determining who stole the cheese, and so on and so forth. But there is a little bit of a catch. The cheese thief is allowed to pick at least one accomplice to assist them in order to get away with it. It's a super cute game. It was a lot of fun. It's a fast game too. I think each time you're only going maybe about 10 minutes per game. And so it's a great party game. It's super easy. It's a great way to introduce people to the concept of social deduction games, especially if they're not used to it. It's super cute with the mice. There's another mechanic with the fall mouse who is designed to try to get people to vote for them, even though they're not the one who stole the cheese, because that player will win the game as well. It's a fast game. It's a lot of fun. I'm so glad I bought it. And it's one of those games that I think it's a great introduction to the concept of social deduction games to get people into that sort of games. There's so many out there, but I think this is the easiest one to get people into, and I love it. It's cute, it's adorable, the mechanic is so much fun. Just the concept of people having to wake up and go to sleep, and you have to lie with each other and things like that. It's adorable. I love it. My number 1 game in my collection, Here to Slay. This is a card-based game designed by the same makers of Unstable Unicorn. In it, you pick one of 6 classes of characters. Usually, they're all based on similar classes that you will see in Dungeons & Dragons. The object of the game is very simple. You are tasked with building out your team, your party of different class creatures, and you're supposed to challenge and defeat 3 monsters, or you can assemble a full party of 6. It's a lot of fun. The cards are adorable. Each class has a different animal theme. Your rogues are your cats, your paladins are your unicorns, I believe. Your fighters are bears. It's adorable. It's made by the same people who make Unstoppable Unicorn, so the artwork is cute. Besides the artwork being super cute, the gameplay itself is actually very fast-paced and challenging, but not overly complicated. It's another deck building game, but it's a lot of fun and it's quick. It's very easy to turn the tide at the drop of a hat. You can easily steal cards from your opponent. You can counter certain opponent spells. There's so much you can do in game, and there's a lot of strategy involved to it. Do you go for the win of trying to assemble a full party? Or do you try to slay the monsters? We have the option of getting things to help you once you slay the monster, or hindrances if you don't slay them. It's a fast-paced game. I love the design of the game. The challenges involved with it are plentiful, but simplified to make it easy for anyone to just kind of pick up and go with. There is expansions for it as well that give you new classes, and it's just so much fun to play, and I love playing it every single opportunity that I get. So it is my #1 game in my collection that I own. So there you have it. That is my ranking of my favorite board games that I own. Let me know if you are interested in any of those games in the comments down below. If you've actually played any of those games, let me know that as well. And what are some of your favorite board games? Let me know that in the comments if you would as well. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really do appreciate it. This is something I've been meaning to go through for a long time, and I'm glad I got a chance to go through it. I would like to actually play some of these on camera, kind of keep an eye out for that. But really appreciate you checking out this video. If you're new to the channel, like I said at the beginning, hopefully you subscribe to the channel. I'd really love to get to know you, and I really hope that you enjoy the content that I put out here. I've got a ton of videos on this channel that you're more than welcome to check out, and I've got a lot of things coming up in the new year, so look forward to those things as well. You can follow me on all social media listed at the end of this video. Like, share, subscribe, and all that fun stuff. And as always, until next time, I will catch you later. Hey, thanks for watching this video. If you did like this video, why not give me a thumbs up and share it with your friends? You can subscribe to the channel by clicking on my gorgeous little face right over there. You can follow me on all the various social media platforms right below. And last but certainly not least, if you've got a few extra minutes, why not check out one of the lovely videos floating right over here. Later.